I challenge the audience, come up with another industry that has a better ratio of low barrier to entry and upside potential. There just is none, right? All you need, as I love to say, is a laptop and a dream, and your RIA is halfway there. And that's really quite true.
Welcome to the Kick It Open podcast, where we bring you compelling stories about the wealth management industry and how to kick the doors open on personal success. I'm your host, Shelby Nicholl. Today's guest is Chuck Failla. Chuck has been a financial advisor for more than 25 years. He started in the early 90s as what he terms a cold calling cowboy in New York City, selling those individual stocks very boiler room-like. As he built his book, he always planned to go independent and did so in 1999 when he opened an independent branch of Raymond James Financial. It was around then that he also earned his CFP and really became a true wealth planner. Chuck's practice evolved into what is today Sovereign Financial Group, an SEC-registered RIA and one of the fastest growing ones in the country. Today, Chuck continues to serve clients as a practicing financial advisor, and Sovereign has evolved to incorporate not only his own practice, but also to be a plug-and-play platform for advisors who are going independent as an RIA. Chuck is also the founder of GoRIA.com and the host of the GoRIA podcast, fueled by investment news. Let's drop in. Welcome, Chuck. I'm so excited for you to be here with me this morning.
Oh, you bet, Shelby. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. So Chuck, just to get us a little bit started, I've shared a little bit about, who you are, et cetera, already, but tell us about your journey in wealth management.
Sure. So it's kind of interesting, and I've been telling the story a fair amount recently. And the best way to put it is, if you've seen the movie Wolf of Wall Street, have you seen that movie?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So do you remember that scene? I think they're in a diner. And when he was talking to the main character, the Belfort character, and he's like, show me that check and I'm going to quit right here. Do you remember that scene? Yeah.
Yes.
Kind of an infamous scene. And so here's the full backstory. I went to the University of Connecticut. I was very involved there in their student fundraising department. From that, I was essentially recruited to a professional fundraising firm that consulted to nonprofits. So essentially my job, in my early 20s was teaching large nonprofits like the Metropolitan Opera, the Wharton School of Business, the Chicago Botanic Garden, Purdue University, how to raise money. And, I was in my early 20s. I was flying 4 days out of the week, which when you're early 20s, that's so cool. In my mid 50s, that would be a nightmare. But in my early 20s, that was a lot of fun. And I was making $34,000 a year. How could it get any better than that? I had all these upgrades because I had all these frequent flyer miles. Life was great. Then a friend of mine, who actually I trained in the fundraising business, he went from fundraising right to 55 Water Street. Mm-hmm. Now, does that address mean anything to you?
It slightly does, but I am from the Midwest. I'm not as much into the New York addresses, but I know Water Street.
Okay. So 55 Water Street was ground zero, was the headquarters of the birth of cold calling, Lehman Brothers, right? And so he went into that, which was very similar to how we were teaching people how to fundraise for nonprofits. And he became very successful very quickly as a stockbroker back at Lehman Brothers. And so we were talking, and it was like that scene. And he was like, here's how much I'm making. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And I said, well, that seems like a pretty good idea. I was like, well, let me try that. So I became a stockbroker. And this was in the mid 90s, like 1994. Was the exact year, I'm pretty sure. Did that for about 4 years, and it was a lot of fun. It was like working in a frat house, to be honest, in a lot of ways, is what it is. But it was a ton of fun. And I realized at that time that this was not a sustainable business model, and it was a silly way to do it. So we were building portfolios for clients, except our clients had 12 of us, right? So most of our clients had 12 different stockbrokers, all of us pitching ideas. And it was the client acting as the planner, if you will, right? So they were taking all the information from 10 to 12 different brokers, and they were trying to compile portfolios. Kind of silly, right? So in 1999, right? So that's about 4 or 5 years later, I quit the commission business, cold calling, cold turkey, got my CFP, and started doing fee-based financial planning. And I thought that was fantastic. I did not bring one client with me though, right? It was those guys were really just into buying and selling stock. I was like, well, that's fine. So I started from scratch for the second time in this industry in 1999. And I did it through the independent broker dealer channel, Raymond James, which I thought was fantastic, and built a really nice fee-based, lifestyle book of business, $100 million, give or take. And so in 2019, I reflected on this for a bit. And I was like, you know what? I'm really not dropping any commission tickets. I'm working as a fee-based advisor within the broker-dealer confines. Why am I doing that? And so that's when I decided to drop my 7, drop my 24, and I converted Sovereign, which at the time was a doing business as, right, because I was part of the Raymond James system, into an actual SEC-registered RIA. And that's coming up on 6 years ago now. And that's been a real passion of mine, the RIA space, because it's something I've always wanted to do, which is have truly my own business. And what I love about the RIA space is I don't think there's any other industry that has the combination of both very low barriers to entry and then upside potential. Like, I don't think there's any other industry that has a better ratio than that. And that brought me to where I am today.
I love this story. And I love that so early in your career, really, you were saying, hey, this commission way of doing business, of clients pulling together their own portfolios, doesn't feel right to me. I'm going to go get my CFP. Like 1999 to get your CFP, that was infancy of financial planning back then, right? So you were very much on that early stage of a really holistic financial planning. And then 20 years later to form the RIA, right? It's right at the height, right as those are all starting to pick up. You've created this thing called GoRIA and the GoRIA podcast. And so we'll link that in the show notes, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But you really did that to sort of like lift the veil, if you will, or, uncloak it on how to create an RIA. And then I really love this, that Investment News named you public enemy number 1 of broker dealers. Tell us how going RIA has become a crusade for you.
Well, it really has. And, to go back, quite a bit further, back when I was like really young, like single digit young, like 8 or 9 years old, all I ever wanted was to have my own business, right? Not to be a rock star, not to be a superstar athlete, which is good because I had neither music nor athletic talent. So that was fortuitous. But from an early age, I really just wanted to have my own business. And the gift of knowing what you want early in life is that every decision you make puts you closer toward that goal. And what I saw early on with the RIA space was this is a real good opportunity to have my own business. And frankly, I saw that back in 1999 when I became a stockbroker, because even then I had my eyes on the independent channel. And I felt I was having my own business. And it kind of is. Not exactly, but it kind of is. It's pretty darn close, right? Until you try to start doing some creative marketing things or work like I do in the media, then there's a real instant reminder that this is not your business. You're still under our compliance oversight. And then that's why in 2019, I made that final breakout to do it truly independently by having my own ADV, my own firm. And as far as the GoRIA, and this is something I like to just be very straightforward on, because I really dislike disingenuousness, right? So this is not purely because I'm on this crusade to save the world from the broker-dealer space, right? It is, in large part, it was started with the following premise. I wanted to use GoRIA.com to educate tens of thousands of advisors about the benefits of the RIA space. Absolutely. But it was also with the understanding, the intention, the expectation that dozens of those advisors would find their way to Sovereign with our value proposition, which is a very niche one, right? We're very hyper-focused on not just financial planning advisors, but very specifically cash flow-based financial planning advisors. We've built the firm specifically for that. So more thinking in terms of e-money, not Money Guy Pro. It's that specific how we built our infrastructure. So that was the idea of GoRIA. And, I had some great success the first year, not because I was doing a great job with the production value. As we were talking offline, it was kind of very Blair Witchy. But the success came because there was such a tremendous amount of interest in this space. And that then evolved into a partnership 2 years ago with Investment News. So that was really GoRIA fueled by Investment News, and that's been a fantastic partnership.
it's super interesting, I think, how you took this planning piece and this desire for your own business from a very young age. I wish I had had a desire for my own business at a very young age. And in fact, I think I have perhaps had that bit of a desire, but I have fought against it my whole career. We were talking earlier offline about Washington University in St. Louis and that I did my MBA there. I did a ton of coursework on entrepreneurship at the time. I took a social enterprise, a nonprofit, through an entrepreneurship program and got them funding and all these things. But it hasn't been until the last year that I founded finally my own business. And I think I had a ton of hesitation, and I know lots of women do in general, and just people do, right? But we sort of hold ourselves back from starting our own businesses at times. And you went into it as an independent broker-dealer at Ray J, and then again with the RIA channel. What do you think holds people back from starting their own practices?
Yeah, I mean, it's really the fear of the unknown in large part, right? And I'll give you a good example. So early on when we started, breaking advisors into Sovereign, and this is a true story, it's really kind of funny. And I was talking to an advisor who really wanted to go independent, wanted to go RIA, and he happened to be with one of the big wirehouses, right? It doesn't matter which one, but it was one of the big wirehouses. And I swear one of his questions was, well, how do you guys get business cards? I was like,
oh,
what do you mean? If you just, go to the printer and get a business card. But they're so accustomed to having everything done for them that any sort of entrepreneurial spirit is just atrophied away. I really think that's a big part of it. And what those folks need to know is there are so many resources out there right now to help you go independent, whether it's tucking it or building your own, that there's no need for that. And then if I were to play sort of, amateur psychologist, I was raised with a lot of confidence. I wasn't raised by a single mother per se, but my father was in the Merchant Marine, so he was gone pretty much half the year, right? He'd be going off on these big oil tankers for 2 months out of the year, and it would just be my mother and I. So in large part, I was raised by my mom. And then I kind of alluded to this earlier, but my father also passed away when I was very young. And then I saw my mother, who was at that time, she's, off the boat from Italy type of thing, right? English was her second language, although she spoke fine. Father passed away, and she got a job at Sears selling carpet, just like that. And that job helped, continue sustaining our family and putting me through college. And so all through that time, I see her doing this, and all during that time as well, she's always instilling into me a lot of confidence. And that confidence is what you really need to do anything in life, I think. But certainly if you're going to start your own business. And then also, learning from her quite a bit is the level of grit, because you also need that in a business. Because let me tell you something, you start a business, unless you're incredibly lucky, it's a grind for years. And you have to be able to stick with it, have that same level of energy and motivation as you did day one when you're designing your logo, kind of the fun phase, to when it really matters in the first formative years. It's almost like raising a child. And that comes at least for me, came a lot from my upbringing. And I'm always incredibly grateful for that. And that was a huge reason for my being able to do whatever I've done so far.
One of the things that makes me think about is that she was selling carpet, right? And so there's a sales aspect to what she was doing as well, which is, offering a product, figuring out what the client needs, matching that up, being a designer, being a consultant to those clients, making sure they make good choices about what they were going to put into their home and that it was going to work for their families. There's a lot of creativity and solutioning that she was doing and that you probably picked up even at that young age.
Without question. And just work ethic, right?
Yes.
It's hard work when you're working on a commission basis, which she was. And, even if you're working on a fee basis, translating it to our industry, it's still commission in the sense that, if you don't get business, you don't get revenue, right? It's not like we have a salary. So the salary or the compensation is fee-based for most of us RIAs, but there ain't no fees unless you get a client. So in that sense, it's very much still an eat what you kill situation.
Absolutely. I was listening. There's a coach for financial advisors named Kristen Burke, and she had Patrick Scott on her podcast, and he talked about how his dad reframed for him kind of commission as just revenue. He's like,
Right.
when you're a physician and you open a practice, you have to get patients, and they give you money for seeing the patients. That's commission, or that's revenue, right? We can think of it in exactly the same way, but those fears do really hold us back. Another podcast I just want to mention is one that I did a few weeks ago in season 1 with Dr. Ellen Reed, and she talked about mental toughness. And to your point about confidence earlier, the data says that confidence is the number one predictor of human success, but it can be learned. It is not a given to you trait. It is a learned trait. And so you can really trick your mind into having more confidence than maybe what you might feel inside. So definitely the sort of fake it till you make it is actually real.
I was just going to say that. Fake it till you make it. Sure.
Yes.
You need to have that confidence in yourself. Otherwise, it's just never going to work. I love that story.
Yeah. She was so great, and she just did a great job. One of the things too that happened, you were at Ray J on the independent broker dealer. When you went RIA, did you sort of just slide over into the Ray J RIA channel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was easy peasy. And it's interesting. I talked to people today and they're like, oh, you're with the hybrid side. Well, no, Raymond James has a custody only solution. Right. So like a hybrid. Well, no, like a custody. It's one of the best kept secrets in the industry. I think it's a great division that they have. I think it's their fastest growing division. I'm almost positive it's their fastest growing for obvious reasons, right? There's so much interest in the RIA space, but it also made for a super simple transition. That said, we've also added Schwab now as well. So we do Schwab and Raymond James, but it couldn't be easier going from Ray J IBD to Ray J RIA. It made for a very easy transition into the RIA space for us.
That's fantastic. And I hear of a lot of advisors doing exactly that. In my consulting practice, I hear of that exact kind of pathway. You go IBD, independent broker dealer. Let's say you are a breakaway from a wirehouse. You go independent broker dealer, kind of clean it up. To your point, you get to the point where most of your business is in the fee-based side. And then you go ahead and transfer over to the custody only solution, create your own RIA at that point. You can do this at Ray J. You can do it at LPL that way as well. So there's a lot of places that you can do this. And then from there, you can go multi-custody, which allows you, as I'm sure you can talk about more so than I can, but allows you to pick up clients from those other custodians quite easily. Yep,
that's very true. It also helps you gather other advisors too, right? Because you're creating more opportunities for more advisors. So without question, and one thing I'll say too, there's a lot of tuck-in options also, where we're seeing a lot of people going from the wirehouse that maybe they don't want to set up their own RIA, but they want the RIA culture, the independence, the higher payout. And let me put it this way, and I say this way quite a bit. If you wanted to go into the wirehouse space, you have like a handful of good choices. If you wanted to go into the IBD space, you have like a dozen good choices. But if you wanted to tuck into an RIA, you literally have hundreds of excellent choices to choose from. And what that means is you're able to essentially tuck into an RIA that's about 98% the way you would have built it anyhow, because there's just so many choices on that rack, if you will, that you could just pull one right off. And of course, if you have that entrepreneurial drive, which I happen to have, there's a ton of resources to build your own. So there's so many ways to do it, which I think is fantastic.
That's great. And one of those tuck-ins is, of course, Sovereign is what you're meaning there, right? Just want to make that clear.
We're definitely one of the hundreds. But what's interesting about us is a couple of things. We are very, very niche, right? So we are not only a good fit for financial planning advisors, but I alluded to this earlier. We're very specific on what our infrastructure is built for. And it is literally built for cash flow-based financial planning advisors. So if the advisor is using like an eMoney or Right Capital or Orion Planning, all of which are cash flow-based, it's a dovetail fit for what we do. If they don't do financial planning, they're just not a fit for us. If they don't do cash flow based financial planning, let's say they use Money Guide Pro. This is not a diss on Money Guide Pro, it's just not our preference. That system doesn't dovetail with our support system. But if they're cash flow based, it's a good fit. Now, luckily for us, we're only looking for 40 advisors. We've publicly stated we're not going to take private equity. We're going to remain owned by ourselves, and we're going to stop at 40 advisors. And we're about halfway there right now. So it's not like we're posing a big threat to like the Mariners and the Mercers out there, right? Who recruit as much in probably a quarter as we're going to do in the life of our firm. But it also lets us to be true to what we're doing and being a great fit for that type of advisor. And if we're not a fit for everyone, that's fine too. We're only looking for 23 more advisors, literally.
We'll be right back.
Hey everyone, Shelby here. Have you ever had a great conversation with a colleague or girlfriend and you leave with an energy boost of inspiration, ready to fight another day? If you're a woman in wealth management, you know that this industry is pretty male dominated. And you also hopefully have experienced the great energy received from gathering with other women. And that feeling was the inspiration for Muriel Network, a digital community for women in wealth management. Learn more at murielnetwork.com. MURIEL network.com. One of the things I think that it's a little unclear there, and I want to make sure it is clear for the audience, is that when you're thinking about those business owners, those advisors who would join a Sovereign or join a platform like Sovereign, they still remain business owners. You're not buying their practices like a Mercer might do. They're remaining independent. You're providing that technology and compliance and other support offering behind the scenes for them.
That's exactly right. So they're still 1099, and it's essentially a very similar model to the IBD model, except it's, independent broker dealers, it's RIA, independent RIA model, I suppose, would be the analogy. But that's exactly right. So they own their clients and they can leave if they wish. It's not like we lock people in. I don't like any of those concepts, right? That's very anti-spirit of the RIA space in my view of the RIA space. So it's very much like that. Now, that said, we do offer a contingency plan, which we call unilateral, meaning we commit ourselves to buy their book if something happens to them, but they can do whatever they want with their book, right? So we can act as a contingency plan, but if they find someone else that they want to sell their book to or whatever they wish to do, it's their choice. We are obligated to buy if something happens to them, but they can choose to sell to whomever they want.
Oh, that's great. And it's actually a nice peace of mind to have that type of a service as well, because we all need a backup plan in case, we get hit by the bus next week, which obviously we hope no one does, but just in case.
Of course, and especially because we are still dealing with usually one-person practices that are affiliating with us. They do like that peace of mind. And they also like the fact that it's unilateral. Like we have to buy, but they don't have to sell. And that gives them a lot of peace of mind.
That's great. I like that unilateral as well. I can appreciate that for them. What do you see as the reasons that most people are moving from, say, independent broker-dealer or wirehouse world to an RIA space? Is it the planning? Is it transparency of fees to clients? Is it client desire? What's driving that shift?
Yeah, it's really all of the above. But I think the one that's not talked about enough, but it's starting to get talked about more, is the last one that you mentioned, which is client demand. So to frame this, I got my CFP a quarter century ago. And I was so excited to have my CFP. And I remember my first, prospect meetings, like, well, I'm a CFP. I'm going to work with you as a fiduciary. And most prospective clients were like, so, wasn't like,
how's that different? What is that?
Yeah, well, you have an office, this advisor has an office, whatever. It doesn't make a difference to me. Now, you fast forward a quarter century, without question, at least 1 out of 3 prospective clients, they're asking me, are you working as a fiduciary? And that's huge progress. And as I like to say, fiduciary lives in the RIA space without question. So I think more clients are demanding this. And then there's, of course, the easy part, which is the economics. You usually make quite a bit more, or better put, you generally are able to retain more of your revenues in the RIA model than you are the BD or even the IBD space, right? Actually just did a podcast with Jamie Hopkins, talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is true net payout. And we joked around saying, well, to all you IBD advisors out there that think you're getting a 92% payout, spoiler alert, you are not getting a 92% payout when you pull back all the layers of the onion. So higher payout, client demand, but you know what I hear the most for people that have gone RIA is the absolute freedom that you have to run your business exactly as you wish to. The products and solutions that you want, the methodology that you want, to do media appearances, to do marketing. There's so much great creative marketing going on right now, which is definitely doable in the broker-dealer space, but it's harder. It's just harder. It just is, right? If I have an idea for a podcast, I do it, I sit down with our chief compliance officer, who's in-house, and we get things done and we get them out to the market very, very quickly. You just can't do it with that level of ease or at all sometimes in the broker-dealer space. And that's been a huge advantage for folks.
That's right. I especially see it on the marketing. I see it in the niching down idea. We're going to have Lauren Oshman on here in a couple of weeks, and she has a very specific niche. And I know you know her as well with Vestia and their focus on physicians. Well, she can offer a greater variety of services because of the RIA model and can really deliver the product line and the solution suite that those very specific clients need because of the RIA, and then also market to that exact point and be able to talk to their exact needs in their language, et cetera, with kind of, as you mentioned, much less oversight. I feel like the marketing side is one of the pieces that's getting such a lot of attention these days. It's one of the places where IBD advisors or broker-dealer advisors or wirehouse advisors, they're feeling those constraints, right? They're getting messages of, no texting with clients, of course, and not able to deliver that in an appropriate way. They are not able to put anything out on social media. Some of the major firms have shut that entirely down, even with things like social proof and other services. There's just a lot of frustration there. What do you see beyond marketing? Marketing seems to be a really important flashpoint. Are there other flashpoints like that?
As far as what you're able to do, sure. I think it's bringing on new services, right? So I've always been an early adopter. I've always been a very curious person. So I see a new solution and I have to hold myself back sometimes, like, oh, that's really kind of cool. But I will explore almost everything new that comes out, right? And it helps with my podcast because I always have a lot to talk about, but it's not a chore for me. I just love that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm a curious person. So for example, we've been talking with this company called Spider Rock, which was recently purchased by BlackRock. And they have a super cool option overlay strategy, right? Which could be a whole nother podcast and probably something we'll cover too. But my point is, you come across an idea at a conference and you could go from hearing about an idea to exploring an idea to implementing that idea lightning fast in the RIA space. Can you imagine an advisor, and I have to laugh, imagine an advisor going to a conference, and this is a wirehouse advisor, right? Fill in the blank wirehouse, whatever it is. And that advisor comes back super excited about, what he or she found out about at this conference, tells their, not branch manager, but what do they call those? The complex managers. Oh, I came across this really great idea at the FPA conference. I'd like to implement it. Crickets, man. I mean, that's not going anywhere, or it's certainly not going anywhere quickly. So the speed in which you can implement good ideas, and that is such a competitive advantage over the broker-dealer space.
Absolutely. There is so much cool stuff happening out there in the fintech space. I was on a call last week with somebody from Derivity, and it is a derivative solution, right? So a structuring and planning for derivatives purchasing. And it was so interesting because they've taken what used to be, I got to call my guy and take 2 weeks to figure it out. And they have created a tech product for it. It is fascinating. Sora Finance is another one. You're a cash flow based planner. This is all about lending and cash for clients. They're another one that's really interesting. So there is so much cool stuff. I'm like you. I love I
love it.
love that innovation. I went to Finovate for the first time like 15 years ago or something. Like, I love that stuff. So, all right. Well, going back to kind of RIA space, what do you think are some of the most successful RIAs, and what is it that they're doing out of the gate that is, creating success, kind of the cheat codes, if you will, of launching an RIA?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to choose from. But I would say the common denominator of the ones that have had the most success are the ones that define what they're doing, right? And they narrow it. And so, for example, Ellevest, which I'm sure you're familiar with, they're crushing it. I mean, just crushing it. And they're clearly focusing on a very specific niche, but they are owning that niche in a way that I don't think I've seen any other RIA really do. So again, knowing who you are, as an advisor, and then it's the same idea as a firm, except now it's a firm as opposed to just a singular person. It's a group of people. That's the only difference. But acting with some level of consistency with what your value proposition is. And we hear this all the time, but I think we hear it all the time for good reason. You can't be everything to everyone. And the RIAs that I've seen have the most success, whether it's a lifestyle RIA or a mega RIA, are the ones that are focusing on that value proposition.
Yeah, I think it's really important to define what you're running to. In my consulting and working with advisors who are often moving firms or doing some other transformation in their business, we talk a lot about what are we running from and what are we running to. And the running from, right, it's easy to identify that. It's misalignment with values. It is bad technology. It's things like that, not being able to do the planning that he or she wants to do. The running to, we kind of have to really put a wall up in between that running from and running to and say, we got to jump over that wall. And we got to jump over the wall to the running to and start really planning what is going to be this new client experience. What do you want to do differently, better, more, bigger in this new space? And so I love that you mentioned Ellevest and they're kind of focused down. I think that's really interesting. And of course, their focus is on women. So of course, I follow Ellevest like many. I did want to talk about a topic here on, kind of my personal agenda, which is how do we get more women to take the leap into building their own firms? What have you been seeing there? What barriers do you see? What do you tell people?
Yeah. And I really think this is true about the RIA space. And I've had a number of discussions on DEI panels about what is the RIA world doing for this? And in the most basic terms is if you don't like the culture, so earlier I mentioned, the frat house culture, which it definitely was, right?
Yes, I bet.
It just is what it was what it was. If you don't like that, you can start your own firm. If you don't like the culture at whatever XYZ broker-dealer you are in, you could either start your own and build your own culture, and certainly Ellevest has done that and then some, or going back to something I said earlier, there are hundreds of great RIAs, all of which have their own tech stack and value proposition, but they all also have their own culture. And I promise, if you're not up for building your own, and not everyone is, not everyone has to be, right? We can't all have RIAs, so it would be kind of a mess. But you could certainly find the RIA that not only has the tech stack and the product solutions that you like, but has the culture that you like. And I think that's going to really accelerate the entire DEI area, whether it's minorities, women, fill in the blank, and they're finding their tribes much more easily because there's so much more choice, right? So going back to the wirehouse, if there's 5 and all 5 are awfully homogeneous, right? I mean, there's not a whole lot of difference in my opinion. But you take a look at 200 RIAs, holy smoke, there's real major differences between those few hundred or so RIAs that I think are worthwhile tuck-in candidates. And I think that's going to really help accelerate this as an industry. And I think that's great for everyone, right? The more diversity, we hear this all the time, the more diverse, the better the advice, right? Because you have different viewpoints. You're able to serve more people better. And by having that choice of culture, let alone tech stacks, let's talk about culture, you have firms with all these different cultures and you could find one that's going to be the right fit for you.
Yeah, I talk about it as personality
Mm.
and it sort of being a chemistry match, if you will, right? Like you want to find where you feel you're going to do your best work when you are entirely yourself. And that means finding a place where you can be entirely yourself. And that is, could be running your own business. It could be starting that RIA from scratch. It's probably these days a tuck-in situation because it's just so much easier,
Mhm.
at least at the beginning of moving to RIA. But it also gives you a community. When it comes to women, often we don't want to be alone. So there's a great community there too, that you get with those tuck-in opportunities. I love this idea of more women forming their own businesses, whether that's an IBD practice, whether that is an RIA practice. It is just taking that full control and then leaning all the way into your strengths.
Mhm. Right. And as I said earlier, I challenge the audience, come up with another industry that has a better ratio of low barrier to entry and upside potential. There just is none, right? All you need, as I love to say, is a laptop and a dream, and your RIA is halfway there. And that's really quite true.
Oh, I like that phrase. And I have heard you say that. We met originally at the Investment News RIA Connect or RIA Activate conference.
Mhm.
I know there's another one coming up on the West Coast, I think soon.
Yes, indeed. It's going to be in San Diego on November 12th. I should know that. I'm the chairperson of this.
I caught you.
Oh my gosh. Yes, November 12th in San Diego. And it's going to be fantastic. Very similar to the one we had with Investment News in New York City, except it will be in San Diego. And we're super excited. We're putting the final touches on the agenda. And if I could give a little spoiler alert on one of them, which I think is going to be great. It's going to be the final session of the day, which I'm going to have the pleasure of moderating. And it's, are you winning the wealth transfer game? Right? So we're going to talk about what can we do to help RIAs bolt on estate planning, bolt on insurance solutions, bolt on cash management solutions to be able to more easily and efficiently engage with what I love to call KOCs, kids of clients. Because what's going to happen, and we all know this, 70, 80 trillion dollars is going to change hands over the next few decades. And when it goes into the hands of the KOCs, kids of clients, according to Cerulli, more than 70% of those KOCs fire mom and dad's financial advisor. Why? Because mom and dad's financial advisor never paid any mind to the KOC. Why is that? Well, it's hard to justify my giving 10, 20 hours a year to a $4,000 Roth that the KOC has. But with the new technology that's out there, you can engage, you can help them, and you can start building that relationship. That's going to be a great panel.
Oh, I love that. I think the other thing for that is going to be the soft skills of engaging with that next generation,
Mm-hmm.
right? It is going to be, how are you auditing yourself to pay attention to both parties of the couple, both of the spouses in those rooms? How are you creating your welcome kit and your client email strategy, et cetera, right? The digital marketing aspects for those individuals is going to be critical as well. So
Absolutely.
very cool panel. I love that.
Yes.
What, kind of finishing up here, what resources might folks be unaware of that could help them take the leap to going RIA?
Sure. So from a self-serving perspective, I would say go to GoRIA.com, and all we have is content for that. And I really do believe it's some great, great stuff. But you know what the secret sauce really is? And I talk about this all the time. You have to go to conferences. You have to go to conferences. And when you go to conferences, whether it's the investment news ones that I am involved with, or FPA, or the custodial conferences like Schwab Impact, and so on and so forth, you have a lot of great content. Absolutely. That's not the best part, in my opinion. The best part when you're at these conferences is you have instant access to other advisors that have already gone RIA. And those are the best people for you to talk to, without question. The other thing that's great about these conferences, what do you do when you're going RIA? Well, you have to build your tech stack and your infrastructure. Well, guess what? When you're at these conferences, you have an entire hall filled with vendors that are dying to tell you about their solution. So rather than spending weeks and months scheduling calls, scheduling demos, you can really go through the big list at these conferences and figure out what your short list is going to be. Super efficient. And then you could do the deep dive. So, other than GoRIA.com, kidding and self-promotion aside, it really is about conferences, joining communities, associations, and just talking to other advisors. And there's a lot of things I love about this industry, but one thing that I love and I'm still amazed by is how open other advisors are to share with you the good, the bad, and the ugly about their experiences with a great deal of specificity, which I just think is amazing. So conferences, associations, those are great ways to really get yourself ready to go RIA.
Love that. Think it's a great point. I know I've learned a ton from conferences over the year. I would go even one step further and say, if you're at a wirehouse, if you're in a captive broker dealer, go to some conferences.
Oh, yeah.
Not just the ones that your firm is putting on, but put yourself in some of these other rooms also and network and learn about what is outside of your own industry or your own, I should say, firm, not industry. But I agree. It's a great place to learn, to meet people, to create a community, to see the tech and see all the things that maybe you just weren't aware of, right? And if you're 5 years into having your RIA and you haven't been to a conference in the last couple of years, it's time to go, right? There's
Without
a lot
question.
of new stuff all the time. It's time to go. Well, Chuck, this was such a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights. Thank you.
You bet. Shelby, thank you very much. I really had a great time.
Me too. Thanks. All right. Thanks for listening to the Kick It Open podcast. The Kick It Open podcast is hosted and developed by Muriel Network in partnership with Catalyst. Learn more at startwithcatalyst.com. Kick It Open is produced by Shelby Nicholl, edited by Aaron Sherman, marketing by Sabrina Portnoy, graphic design by Dawn Gallagher. If you found today's podcast valuable, please help us out by subscribing and sharing with your friends. Just click that little plus sign or the follow button wherever you get your podcasts.